This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by Dole Food Company, the world's leading producer and distributor of fresh fruits and vegetables.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of straight talk radio. I want to take a moment to welcome veterans as well as active members of our armed forces who are tuning in over the internet today, and also listeners who are joining us on new radio affiliates in Texas, Wyoming, New York, North Carolina, Florida, Illinois, and throughout all 50 states, including the beautiful islands of Hawaii. In just a moment, former Senate Majority Leader Mr. Tom Daschle will be joining us to talk about why the partisan divide in Washington continues to worsen and what can be done to bring both parties together to get more work done. But before Mr. Daschle joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Thomas Andrew Daschle was born in Aberdeen, South Dakota, the eldest of 4 brothers. He earned his degree in political science from South Dakota State University, making him the first person in his family to graduate from college. In 1969, Daschle entered the United States Air Force, where he worked as an intelligence officer. Once his military service was completed, he signed on as an aide to Senator James Aberesk. Then, in 1978, Daschle was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served for 8 years. In 1986, Daschle was elected to the United States Senate, where he served as Minority Leader, then Majority Leader, then Minority Leader, then Majority Leader. Even with all the back and forth, Daschle was consistently respected by both parties as one of the hardest working members in the Senate, serving on the Finance Committee, Agriculture, Nutrition, Forestry Committees, Veterans Affairs, Indian Affairs, the Ethics Committee, and, well, you get the picture. Daschle retired from the Senate in 2005 and went to work as a policy advisor in the private sector and co-founded the Bipartisan Policy Center. Early this year, in a bold move, Daschle joined with fellow Republican Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott to release a book titled Crisis Point, and we'll hear more about why both leaders felt this book was necessary to write together. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report one of our nation's hardest working public servants, Mr. Tom Daschle. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Daschle.
Glad to be with you, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
Well, first, let me congratulate you and Senator Lott on the success of your new book, Crisis Point. The book goes a long way towards starting a conversation we need to have in this country, which is to ask ourselves what exactly is fueling the partisan standoff in Washington and destroying our ability to broker compromise. So maybe we can start there. What's caused our leaders to become so divided?
Well, I think in large part it's due to the extraordinary pressure both parties now feel to satisfy their base, the far right in particular, but to a certain extent the far left as well. The bases have become energized in recent years for many of the same reasons. People don't feel as if Washington is representing them anymore. They don't feel Washington is responsive to their concerns. They're concerned especially about the extraordinary dysfunction. And so a lot of people that generally would be considered in the political center of our American political spectrum are ceding that opportunity to choose leadership to those on the far right and the far left. And so it starts with that. But money plays an issue, the fact that people aren't in Washington anymore. We've been escalating the bash Washington approach to politics for the last 25 years. It's escalated dramatically in the last 10 years. So all of those factors have really played a big role in the dissatisfaction and the polarization we see today.
Now, you both agreed to title this book Crisis Point, and that's a pretty startling title. Why call it Crisis Point?
Well, frankly, Rebecca, we're very concerned about the degree to which our country is being governed today. I think it's probably the most polarized, the most dysfunctional, the least capable of addressing the challenges we face in at least 150 years. And because we feel that strongly and feel that there's really no safety net here. I mean, we either survive or we don't. And in large measure, it's going to be determined by how much leadership we can offer the country in the coming years. We try to give a prescription for some of that leadership in the book, but it is a crisis, and we've got to call it what it is in order to get people's attention and hopefully their consensus about doing something about it.
Now, you and Mr. Lott feel that the fact that our leaders don't move to and live in Washington has contributed a great deal to this divide. People no longer socialize, their kids don't go to the same school. And so this social network, which once connected our leaders, has completely broken down. Is that right?
You have to know people in order to work with them. And in order to work with them, you've really got to be able to communicate with them. And none of that happens today. Most members of Congress get on an airplane literally on a Thursday afternoon. They're in their states or they're raising money around the country from Friday through Monday, and they come back on Tuesday. So literally we try to run the country Tuesday afternoons, Wednesdays, and Thursday mornings. This country cannot be governed with such little time in Washington. They're going to be in Congress about 109 days this year out of 365. That just doesn't make sense. We owe the people of this country more time, more commitment, more hard work than what we're getting.
But you can't force people to move to Washington. I guess what I'm asking is whether that's something that can be mandated by law if you're elected, or it needs to be something that the party establishment takes under their wing.
Well, I think there's a number of things you can do. One thing you could do, and we talk about this in the book, is maybe we should not allow members of Congress to raise money while we're in session. That way they wouldn't have to be racing all over the country on weekends. We could do that. When Senator Lott and I ran the Senate, one of the things we did, and we certainly don't want to give the impression that everything we did was the way it should be done now, but why not have votes on Fridays and Mondays and keep people in the Washington realm, in the legislative body for an entire week. 3 weeks working and 1 week off is something that has generally been the practice. That's no longer the case. So people just don't spend the kind of time here, and they don't move their families here. You have over 50 members of Congress who now sleep on their sofas, and that's just unacceptable. It's a new form of public housing that I don't think we should accept.
But then how does that change? Is that something the party leadership needs to take as an agenda? In other words, do they need to speak to the members of their own party and say, we're going to start putting legislation up for votes on Mondays and Fridays? You need to commit to a 5-day work week. I mean, Lord knows the rest of the United States is working 5 days a week and more.
Well, that's exactly right. Our work week is getting longer in the country. People are working longer and getting paid less, relatively speaking. So that's exactly what I think the American people want to see. They want to see Congress get things done, first of all. They'd like to see them working, secondly, and I think they want to see them end this incredible money race. And we've got to do a lot of things. And that's why I say we've gradually gotten into this, and it's crescendoed in the last few years. And I think unless we really take these problems one by one, address them with solutions that make sense, using the past as prologue here, I don't think we're going to get off this crisis point, and we can't afford not to do that.
Yes, well, I agree with you. I really liked some of the suggestions that were made in the book. As you know, from the moment someone is elected, they are permanently campaigning and raising money. That's part of what causes them to fly back into back to their homes. And I like your idea of saying, well, if you're elected, we don't want you to be doing that, and we do want you to spend more time in Washington. And we strongly recommend that you move there. And I think one of the points I want to make is that that's something citizens can ask the candidates that are running for office. Do you plan to move to Washington, D.C.? I mean, that's a very good and legitimate question. I'd like to urge people to ask their elected officials that simple question. We have to take our first break, but stay right where you are. We'll be right back with more from Tom Daschle. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Caraccioli Cellars recently celebrated the 5th anniversary of their tasting room. We caught up with Scott Caraccioli, who told us a little about Caraccioli's quick rise to success.
I'm very excited and very proud to be here sharing our wines with some of our wine family and our biggest supporters over the last 5 years. It's been an amazing ride, quickest 5 years of my life, and it's been a real joy to share our family's passion with a lot of our closest friends. I'm a full believer in it being a real experience, not just juice in a bottle. And I think when you come in the door of the tasting room, the experience that you have with the staff and the aesthetics, the wine, and all the way down, that's what we really try to deliver. We want you to have a great time, enjoy the wine from the start to finish.
Visit the Caraccioli Tasting Room on Dolores Street in Carmel by the Sea, or find us online at caraccioliCellars.com, or reach us by phone at 831-622-7722.
If you're wondering what to do with all that data you're creating, do I have an offer for you? Tableau is drag-and-drop software that people of any skill level can use to analyze and turn data into something actionable. That's right, I said actionable. And isn't that what all that data is for? With Tableau, you can connect to any data in virtually any format and visualize it on the fly. Databases, spreadsheets, even big data sources are instantly combined into usable charts, graphs, reports, and dashboards. People can analyze data and drag and drop at 10 times the speed of a traditional business intelligence system. But the most impressive thing about Tableau is that anyone can use it. And just to prove the point, you can get a free 14-day trial from Tableau just by mentioning you heard this ad. But do it now, because this offer won't last. For your free 14-day trial, visit Tableau at tableau.com/Costa. That's tableau.com/Costa. Tableau software. What's your data trying to tell you?
Hi, everyone. It's MZ to invite you to one of two upcoming free lectures by Doc Wallach, one in South San Francisco and the other in Freedom. Somebody Needs to Go to Jail is the best lecture Doc has ever done, and everyone should see it. Doc Wallach has the answer to the U.S. healthcare crisis, and it's real simple and costs very little, and he wants to share it with anyone who will listen. Doc Wallach will appear live at the Best Western Hotel in South San Francisco, California at 380 South Airport Boulevard, beginning at 7 p.m. Wednesday, March 30th, and the following evening, Thursday, March 31st, starting at 7 p.m. at the VFW Hall, 1960 Freedom Boulevard, Freedom, California, near Watsonville. Both events are free, and if you attend, you will find that it is impossible to be bored at a Dr. Joel Wallach lecture. In fact, you will be amazed as well as riveted. Email mz@kscohealth.com for free reservations. That's mz@kscohealth.com.
It may be hard to believe, but people just like you are already saving money. FeedThePig.org makes it easy. Their simple savings plan teaches you how to start saving without going overboard. So you don't need to ditch the car and start rollerblading to work.
I look ridiculous.
You look ridiculous!
You don't need to start foraging wild berries.
I was skeptical, but these are actually pretty good.
You don't need to sell your organs on the black market.
Lie back. This is gonna hurt.
Yeah, that hurts.
You don't need to rent out your apartment to drifters.
I made a fire with the wood in your bedroom.
That's my dresser!
And your closet door.
You just need an internet connection. Don't get left behind. Start your personal savings plan with the tips and tools on feedthepig.org. That way, you don't need to sell all your belongings and live in a commune.
These dungarees belong to all of us now, Tom.
Brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is former Senate Majority Leader and co-author, along with Trent Lott, of the new book, Crisis Point, Mr. Tom Daschle. And before the break, you were making the point that one of the reasons for the current partisan divide is the fact that elected officials spend so little time in Washington. They don't know each other. They don't live there anymore. And that's really kind of broken down the camaraderie and the back-channel communications. And it's very hard to broker compromise with people that you don't know. Now, you and Trent Lott also agree that a 24/7 news cycle is contributing to polarization. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Well, we've seen an enormous amount of hyperbole in news reporting these days, and what we've done is blended news and entertainment in a way that I think has distorted the news process as we've long known it. It used to be journalists were referees. They called the strikes and balls and outs, but now to a large extent, journalists are participants. They're not referees anymore. And as participants, they take sides. And as they take sides, they continue to coarsen the rhetoric and create an even more confrontational environment. All you have to do is look at the presidential race this year to see just what a dramatic change there's been in the style of reporting and the extraordinary amount of entertainment value there is to these debates and the ongoing slugfest that occurs almost daily now. And the media just plays right into all of that. So it exacerbates the problem dramatically. And there's hardly a cable news station or a social website that doesn't contribute to that. And that's very unfortunate in my view.
It is unfortunate. And those candidates who really focused on substance, I call out Ben Carson, John Kasich, Bernie Sanders. I mean, those that have stayed away from the attacks have seemed to get the least coverage.
Well, that's right. I think it's Bernie Sanders, I think, while I may not agree with everything he has proposed, at least he's not made it personal. I think on the Republican side, so many of the attacks have been so personal and so, I think, so demeaning, really. I'm very, very troubled by the coarseness of the rhetoric and the confrontational tone that goes on almost daily with very personal attacks. And, well, that certainly isn't the first time it's happened. I think it's happened to a greater degree and with greater frequency than we've ever seen, at least in my lifetime.
But it's much nastier. I've never seen anything like this, and, I've been around a while. But here again, it's not as if the 24-hour news cycles are going to go away, and you can't make laws that are going to restrict a person's right to speak publicly. So how do you mitigate this aggravating factor?
Well, that's really one of the hard choices. I mean, that's something the media is going to have to try to help us figure out, because now they just play to this hyperbolic campaign rhetoric, and the more coarse you are, the more outrageous you are, the more coverage you get. And you're right. The First Amendment guarantees people have the opportunity to do that, and there's nothing that prohibits media from covering it. And that entertainment value is something that seems to sell a lot of ads, and so it's troubling to me. And I'm not sure there is an answer to that. I think one of the things Trent Lott and I both feel strongly about is we have to limit the length of time campaigns go on. There's got to be a way to reduce the amount of time. We've been at this now for over a year, and we still have almost a year more to go. And I just as we get closer to the election, you're going to be interrupting advertising with programs occasionally. There's so many of those ads. And so I think we've got to be very concerned about the implications of this for the quality of governance going forward. I mean, you shouldn't have to have a viewer advisory before you have a debate on presidential politics, but that's almost necessary these days, and that's just wrong.
It is. It's the first time I wasn't sure I wanted my kids to watch the debate.
Exactly.
And I've never been in that position. I mean, I want my children to be civically involved, but I'm not really sure at this point. Now, I want to point out that in spite of being each of your party's senior leaders in the Senate, you and Trent Lott passed 3 balanced budgets together, something that seems impossible given the state of affairs in Washington today. Trent Lott recently said that this was because you were both willing to put every single spending cut and revenue increase on the table for consideration. There were no sacred cows, and you were willing to look and discuss every option. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And I that's the other major problem. People are unwilling to find common ground today. It's a tactical debate that goes on almost daily with legislators these days. There's greater and greater inclination to stand your ground, to believe that compromise is capitulation. And if compromise is capitulation, you never get to common ground. And if you don't get to common ground, you can't govern. Imagine a stadium with 300 million people in it, the President of the United States down in the center of that big stadium asking the American people what tax policy or health policy or education policy should look like. You can only imagine the cacophony of voices. If every one of them said, I'm going to stand my ground, I'm not going to budge, you'd have chaos. And that's exactly what's happening in Congress every day on almost every issue.
It almost seems as though if you compromise, the parties view this as disloyalty or weakness of some type, and they've virtually driven all the moderates out of Washington.
Well, I would say, Rebecca, that first of all, I would agree with you. I think, though, I would just say part of the parties. I think it's the diehard, just take no prisoners people that are the activists on both sides in some cases and in most cases, and they're the ones who vote in the primaries. And because we put so much emphasis on primaries rather than the general election today, we find people are very fearful of getting beat, not in a general election against a Democrat or a Republican, but in the primaries against somebody in their own party. And because, in fact, we've even given it a name now, we call it you don't want to get Lugered, because that's what happened to a very respected United States Senator from Indiana, Dick Lugar.
Yes.
He got beat because he did work with people on the other side. And as a result, he got penalized. That happened to Bob Bennett in Utah, and Mike Castle in Delaware. That's happened to a lot of others. And when that goes on, it sends a clear message. You better not compromise because we're going to come after you in the next primary. And that's just wrong. You can't govern that way.
That's right. And as you point out, there have been victims that have tried to compromise. But I've got to believe that your willingness to consider every spending cut and every revenue source had to have rubbed certain members in your party the wrong way. After all, any cut you recommend is going to affect some state or some constituency. So this is almost a guarantee that someone's going to be unhappy and put up a fight, isn't it? So how did you get around that in your own party?
Well, that's, I guess, without sounding too braggadocious here, I think that's what you call leadership. I think you've got to realize that, your job isn't to get elected so you can get reelected. Your job is to get elected so you can do things, so you can accomplish things. And almost nothing about public policy is easy. Everything is difficult. There are philosophical obstacles, there are political obstacles, there are factual obstacles. I mean, there are just so many different challenges as you try to put this all together. So it's hard.
Well, as you point out, that's the job. That's the job you get elected for, is to overcome those obstacles. We have to take a scheduled break. We'll return after these brief messages from today's sponsors. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Big data is being generated by everything around us all the time. Every digital process and social media exchange produce it. Systems, sensors, and mobile devices transmit it. Big data is arriving from multiple sources with ever-increasing velocity, volume, and variety. It's becoming the world's newest resource for competitive advantage, allowing decision-making to move from the elite few to the empowered many. The escalating demand for insights requires a fundamentally new approach to architecture, tools, and practices. To extract meaningful value from big data, you need optimal processing power, analytics capabilities, and skills. Find out how IBM Big Data and Analytics can transform your business. Visit www.ibm.com/bigdata today. That's www.ibm.com/bigdata.
Care from the Heart is a dedicated and professional home healthcare agency that's been serving families in the Tri-County Monterey Bay area for over 18 years. We help our clients and their families handle health challenges with determination, love, and humor. When you work with Care from the Heart, we provide assistance with the utmost respect. Your team will consist of nurses, case managers, and home care specialists who will listen, and you will design a flexible program to fit your specific needs, either short-term or long-term. You might need help with medication, personal hygiene, meal preparation, transportation, companionship, household chores, or pet care. We can even help you with the dreaded insurance paperwork. If the time has come when you must step into the role of caregiver for a family member, naturally you'll have questions and concerns. Care from the Heart offers classes that provide specific information and skills you'll need to become the positive and supportive influence your family member deserves. And we protect against caregiver burnout by offering periodic respite care for you. Whatever your individual situation, now or in the future, help is available. For a complimentary consultation, call us at 831-476-8316. We can come to you, or you are welcome to visit our office in Santa Cruz near Dominican Hospital. Our website is carefromtheheart.net.
Greetings, KSCO listeners. This is Randy the Realtor with another real estate fact. Did you know real estate can act as a savings account, a tax deduction, an investment, and give you a place to sleep at the same time? But don't neglect it. You need to pay attention to make it work for you and not against you. Whether it's plumbing and electrical or making sure you have the right insurance coverage, take care of it. They won't maintain themselves. If you want more real estate facts, call me. If it's time to buy or sell a home, give me a call. 831-566-2590.
Is your computer running real slow like this? Or are you getting the blue screen of death? Do you have to do a restart several times a session? Tired of viruses, spyware, malware, and slow, worthless tech support? Face it, it's too late to download another free PC Fix-It program, thinking it'll be restored to out-of-box purity. Oh, no. You need the fast, friendly computer pros at User Friendly Computing. Just drop it off at their office at 505 River Street across from the Gateway Plaza, or give them a call at 831-423-9653, and they'll come to you. Mention KSCO and get a free $50 diagnostic. PC or Mac, desktop or laptop, they can do it all at User Friendly Computing. Call 831-423-9653.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, my guest today co-authored the new book, Crisis Point, with fellow Senate leader Trent Lott. We are fortunate to be speaking with Tom Daschle. Now, switching gears for a moment, we're witnessing a very visible and important partisan battle regarding the appointment of the next Supreme Court justice. Trent Lott has said that any credentialed, viable candidate should be considered by the Senate. But as you know, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Grassley have been pretty firm about their position that this appointment should be made by the next president. Tell us, in a situation like this, how does this get resolved?
Well, I can't get resolved unless Mitch McConnell makes the decision, and this is a majority leader's prerogative. He is the one who makes the schedule on the floor. The minority leader does have the ability to put a resolution on the table that would require a motion to proceed to the nomination, bypassing actually what we call discharging the committee of responsibility. That most likely would go down on a party line vote. So those are the two options. Either leader can make a motion to bring the nomination to the floor and have that vote. But it doesn't appear that Democrats have the votes, at least at this point, and it certainly appears that Mitch McConnell is going to hold firm with his commitment not to have any official action taken, even a hearing, and in most cases not even a meeting with the nominee. And so it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved anytime soon. What I worry about, Rebecca, is that this is really going to set a very dangerous precedent. In 200 years, we've never had this happen before. We've seen 13 people nominated and confirmed in the final year of a president's term, 13 over all of history. So this will be a major new historical precedent that could really wreak havoc on future circumstances very similar to this as time goes on.
Well, this gives credence to the fact that you've named this book Crisis Point, and you and Senator Lott have been making the point that it has never been this bad. This is a new low. It is. It's a new low, and we've just seen an example just in the last week where you had a hung jury for the most part in the Supreme Court, and it was a 4-4 tie. And there's very likely to be a series of 4-4 ties
That also, by the way, troubles me a great deal. It didn't used to be that the Supreme Court was so predictable, so political, so clearly philosophically divided. That is happening more and more, in large measure because we put these screens on these nominees now. They either have to be conservative or liberal, they have to be pro or against abortion, and ultimately people vote and force this nominating process to become even more polarized. So that also is a dangerous precedent. We shouldn't see a political Supreme Court, a polarized Supreme Court. What we need are people who can really be, I use the word referee referring to journalists. We certainly need a good referee when it comes to the courts, and that's becoming increasingly difficult to achieve.
Well, it's almost as though we don't respect the function of the third branch of government. You know, we need that third branch to be objective, and we're not respecting what our founding fathers had in mind. You know, speaking of which, I had this clever idea, and then, you know, we were at a dinner party, and everyone said, hey, that is a pretty good idea. And I said, you know what I think ought to happen? All the Supreme Court justices ought to get together, and one that is left of center ought to volunteer to step down so that both parties can get one more person on. You know, like, let's create two openings. If there's one opening, because this is what I did with my kids. If my kids were fighting over one thing, I'd say, well, we'll go buy another so you can each have your own.
Well, it's you know, you have several members now in their later years, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that even before the end of the year you could have another vacancy.
Right, but let's have a left-leaning vacancy so that there's two openings and everybody gets what they want. It goes back to when Scalia was there, right? The balance is still there.
Well, it plays to the predictability you're talking about. I mean, this is what troubles me, is you shouldn't have to say, well, we want a liberal and a conservative, or a Democrat or a Republican. What we want are justices who see the law objectively and fairly and are unpredictable. I'd love to have people on the left surprise us now and then, just like people on the right. I wish the whole court were swing votes, not just one or two.
There you go.
That's really rare. We don't see the swing votes like we used to.
That's right. We should not know how the justices are going to vote. That would be a real Supreme Court, and you're absolutely right on that point. Let's talk about the presidential primaries for a moment. Neither of the front runners of either party have a history of being good at compromise. Does that concern you?
It does. I am very troubled by just the rigidity that we're seeing and the determination to even polarize and politicize more. I mean, I worry a lot about where this is all headed and what the implications are next year, this time. I just hope that the country is prepared to go through. If this is a crisis point, you're going to see crisis point times 10 if things go even more badly, and we can't afford that. I travel quite a bit internationally, and you wouldn't believe how appalled and how mystified and how concerned people all over the world are as they watch this spectacle. I'm always surprised, even after all these years, by how many millions and millions of people watch with immense curiosity the ongoing political developments in this country. Even in some of the remote parts of the world, they're just fascinated by it. But they're just mystified, troubled, and very, very deeply concerned. What will happen to this beacon of democracy and what implication it has for them as we go forward. So this isn't just about us. It's really about the international climate and environment as well.
Yes, absolutely. We have been a role model for the rest of the world, and so it's natural that they would look and be mystified. In fact, we are American citizens, and we ourselves are mystified as to what's going on. But let's talk about the front runners. We'll start with Mrs. Clinton and work our way to Mr. Trump. It's going to be pretty hard for her to reach across the aisle and get cooperation after spending years accusing the Republicans of a deliberate right-wing conspiracy against her and her husband. That's going to be pretty tough to overcome, don't you think?
It is. But I must say I served with Senator Clinton and now Secretary Clinton for a number of years in the Senate. And I remember when she came to the Senate, I was majority leader, and she asked for advice. And I said, work across the aisle, do your homework in the committees, show up and work and offer amendments and ask questions and stay off the Sunday talk shows. And she did exactly that. And she had a great relationship with a lot of Republicans. She was in some ways a little bit like Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy used to be very vocal and very very strong-willed with regard to the positions he held, but he was an amazing compromiser and reached across the aisle to scores of Republican senators to accomplish an enormously successful legislative career. That, I think, is something Hillary Clinton was capable of doing and occasionally actually did it. She served on the Armed Services Committee, which is a very difficult committee on which to serve, and worked across the aisle with people like Lindsey Graham and John McCain quite frequently. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that she can replicate that again, but there's no question, just as you've suggested, it is going to be difficult.
I take it you're not that worried that we'd see 4 more years of this contentiousness between the Oval Office and Congress?
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. I'm certainly concerned and anxious about it. I'm troubled by almost all the scenarios I can envision for next year. But I guess I would say that I'm probably least troubled by that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I join you there. I'm troubled. It's the first time. I'm 61 years old, Senator Daschle, and it's the first time that I had to ask Ralph Nader if it was unpatriotic if I didn't vote. And he had a good answer. He says, if you don't like the candidates, yes, it's unpatriotic not to vote. You vote your conscience and do a write-in. So this may be the first time I elect that option. We're going to take another short break. This is our final intermission. When we come back, we'll see how the leading Republican candidate stacks up when it comes to compromising. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Do you love creating salads as much as you enjoy eating them? Hi, I'm Amy Tobin, cookbook author and culinary expert. Dole inspires fresh and wholesome dishes for any meal with their wide selection of salad blends and all-natural salad kits. From the mild and tender texture of sweet butter lettuce to the crunch of classic romaine sprinkled with colorful shredded carrots and red cabbage, Dole has over 30 salad blends to satisfy every palate. If you're looking for the ultimate in convenience, try Dole's unique salad kit combinations that include farm-fresh lettuces and vegetables, mouth-watering all-natural toppings, and specially made dressings. It's all you need to make a distinctively delicious salad. The possibilities are endless. Visit www.dolesalads.com for recipes and other ideas to feed your culinary imagination.
Caraccioli Cellars recently celebrated their 5th anniversary of their tasting room. This is what enophiles had to say.
My name is Samantha Cooper. The wines are so beautifully crafted, and you take so much time and effort that goes into making it. 4 years to make one bottle of wine, and they're just beautifully crafted, and they come out so amazing. My favorite would have to be the Brut Rosé. It's very near and dear to my heart. It was my wedding wine, actually. They loved it.
Edmund Benich. I love the cuvee. I love the sparkle. It tickles my nose.
Sarah Hines. I've been drinking Caraccioli for 5 years, and I love it. I'm across the board on this. I've been drinking their sparkling wine for some time, and I love them all. I entertain a lot. I enjoy entertaining using the Caraccioli wines.
Visit the Caraccioli Tasting Room on Dolores Street in Carmel by the Sea, or find us online at caracciolicellars.com, or reach us by phone at 831-622-7722.
This is an announcement for all people who want to take a risk-free challenge to whiten their teeth in 5 minutes using clinically proven power swabs. This risk-free challenge is for people whose smile has been yellowed by coffee, tea, or smoking. It's so effective, we challenge you to try it for 5 minutes to see how white your smile could be. If lines are busy, try again. Dial 1-800-973-6563. That's 1-800-973-6563. 1-800-973-6563.
Hey America, we need to have a little talk. We've got more food in our country than we know what to do with. Food at the grocery store and food in the vending machines fast food, health food, and seafood. We've got so much food that anything people don't buy, we just throw out. Yet 17 million kids in America struggle with hunger. That ain't right. Luckily, the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks has volunteers gathering excess food and getting it to hungry kids. They're kind of like food angels. Yeah, I made that up. It's kind of catchy. Hello, people. This isn't rocket science. We could solve hunger today. To start, become a food angel yourself by supporting Feeding America in your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. That's a website, duh. We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
It's always open house at the Mike Young Real Estate Hour, and you are always invited to walk right in and join the discussion. Hello, I am Mike Young, and I love talking real estate with all the experts and with you. So get a jump on the Real Estate Weekend every Friday, 7 p.m. on the Mike Young Real Estate Hour, right here on Listen and Be Heard Radio KSCO. The Mike Young Real Estate Hour is brought to you by Thunderbird Real Estate, Real People Selling Real Estate, by Rick Williams at American Pacific Mortgage, and by Steve Manville at Farmers Insurance. Friday at 7. See you then.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is Senator Tom Daschle. And when we ended the last segment, we were talking about Mrs. Clinton's ability to bring the leadership of both parties together. So now let's talk about Trump, who has maintained a fairly steady lead for the past 10 months. He seems to be making the case that the same skills he uses in business to broker compromise between competing interests are transferable to government. What do you think?
Well, I think there's some truth to that. I worry a lot, though, that I don't think I would be very good in his business. I can't imagine that I could step into the Donald Trump operation and make the judgment on his big business deals. And I have a fear that he would be equally as incapable of doing that in my business, in this work. A lot of, I would ask somebody, how would you feel about going to a doctor who's never practiced medicine, and he's going to tell you you need a heart transplant, and I'm going to do it. That's the kind of the governing is complicated. The issues, I worry a lot about his incapability to understand, much less take positions on the issues that confront this country. What do we do with nuclear weapons? What do we do with all of the extraordinarily complex and difficult diplomatic challenges that we face around the world? How do we deal with the immense problems we have with deficits and the economy and finding the right people to serve in these high levels of responsibility in government? All of that requires some degree of understanding about governance. And frankly, I'm very concerned about whether he's got it.
Mm-hmm. So a surgeon, you use an example of a surgeon. A surgeon requires some very unique skills. Is there something in governance that you would say it requires a certain unique skill that those who excel in business may not possess?
Well, I think there is a unique skill is maybe not quite the word, but certainly unique appreciation of policy and unique appreciation of the implications of policy. One example, the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 1960s.
Yes.
We came within inches of going to a nuclear exchange, but we had a president, not that old, frankly, not all that experienced, but he had served in the House and in the Senate. And he had good people around him. That was the other thing. He had enormously qualified people, and we averted a nuclear exchange that could have had devastating consequences on not only on our country but the rest of the world. That is going to happen again. We are going to be faced with crises of that magnitude, and to have somebody with absolutely no experience and a very cavalier attitude about experience and policy implication causes me real alarm and concern. We might get through it just fine, but that's a big risk, and I'm not so sure that I'm willing to take it.
Mm-hmm. Now, but there's no question that many of Mr. Trump's statements have been divisive, from his plans to build a wall to halting the immigration of Muslims to many of his remarks about women. Yet, on the other hand, he's been able to negotiate endorsements from former foes like Chris Christie and Ben Carson, which seems to show a certain skill in reaching an agreement.
Well, I think that's right, and again, I think you can say with absolute certainty that Donald Trump is a huge question mark. I don't know what motivated Chris Christie and others to support Mr. Trump, but that's a judgment everybody has to make. I'm just telling you how I feel. I think there are others who feel as I do, but that doesn't mean it's unanimous. There are a lot of people who had different views, and let's just hope they're right.
Yeah, I guess your feeling would be that Mr. Trump might not be the best to bring the parties together and to negotiate compromise, or do you think that he would bring those business skills into Washington?
Well, I think we talked earlier in the hour about standing ground and finding common ground.
Yes.
He doesn't appear to be somebody from his public utterances willing to find common ground. I mean, this whole notion of building a wall is just phenomenally naive and extraordinarily expensive and, yes, and completely without merit. But nonetheless, he is adamant that that'll be the first thing he does. He says he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I have yet to see really how he's going to deal with all of the implications of putting 20 million people who have insurance out on the street again without insurance. He hasn't offered anything that will rectify that. So there are so many deep concerns and frankly causes for real alarm with many of the policy prognostications and positions he's taken, and I'm troubled by that. If he can find a way to compromise and find common ground, I don't know how you find common ground on a Mexican wall, but
well, you have to stand on the wall.
Well, I guess that's it. But,
it has to be wide enough we can stand on it.
There's an enormous naivete that I think, if for the purposes of governing 320 million people, we've got our hands full.
Now, for listeners today who are convinced that we have to put the greater good of the country ahead of partisanship, what would you tell them to look for in the current field of candidates for the presidency?
Well, I think it's really important that we all, number one, stay engaged. I once had a voter who said, "I never voted," just encourages them. And I think you've got to be concerned about how many people are just going to sit on their hands and not do. You had mentioned earlier your own dilemma, your own situation with regard to what to do. And I think we've got to be engaged. This is a democracy that requires participation. And if we don't participate, we cede the ground, as others have done in other countries and woefully regretted what happened as a result. We can't cede the ground to those who are uncompromising and determined to have only their way. Mm-hmm. I think it's critical that we demand good governance. I think, as you suggested earlier, members of Congress ought to be asked, how many days are you going to work in Washington if we elect you to go there? How many things are you going to pledge you're going to try to work to get done? How are you going to work across the aisle? What are you going to do exactly to find common ground? Those are the things we ought to be asking, and I think it's critical, especially in times like this, that we do it more frequently.
Well, I know that after speaking to you, that will be on my list of questions for each of the presidential candidates now. And every senator and every representative that runs for office, I'm going to ask them, how many days a week do you plan to work? Lastly, before we run out of time, where can listeners go to get more information about your book, Crisis Point?
Well, we Trent Lott and I both have websites, and TomDaschle.com, and I would encourage you to check that out. But our publisher, Bloomsbury, has great website. Amazon has a wonderful review, several reviews of the book. So there's several sources, but Googling it always works well. And but our websites and Amazon, Bloomsbury, all have terrific sources of information.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. But before we say goodbye, I do want to thank you for your wonderful book. I enjoyed it so very much, and also for your service to our country. Thank you, Mr. Daschle.
Thank you, Rebecca. I enjoyed the hour.
If your station is leaving us after the first hour and you have a question or a comment to make about our interview with Tom Daschle, you can email me at RebeccaCosta.com or drop me a note on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I don't know of a single American who isn't disappointed in how little work is getting done in Washington and isn't concerned with running out the clock when it comes to issues such as our growing debt, the threat of terrorism, nuclear proliferation, fast-moving viruses, a large aging population, and, well, the list goes on and on. But how will any of these problems get better if government leaders are unwilling to put the American people and compromise ahead of dogma? Send your comments to me at RebeccaCosta.com. I love to hear from you, and I take time to answer every email that we receive. So take a moment and tell me what's on your mind. And if you missed the full interview with Tom Daschle, remember you can download episodes of the Costa Report from Apple iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, and also our website at RebeccaCosta.com. That's also where you'll find our weekly blog that's posted every week on our website and also on the Huffington Post. Last week's blog was all about the brave new world of sensor technology. So pick it up at RebeccaCosta.com. My guest next week was the second person to walk on the surface of the moon. Former astronaut Buzz Aldrin will be here to talk about a manned mission to Mars in 2040. Don't miss the one and only Buzz Aldrin next week, right here on the only news program that puts policy ahead of politics. Now stay tuned for a second hour of Straight Talk Radio. You're listening to the Costa Report.